people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, it appears that Mayer versus Linardatou as a conversation, as a fight, has gained a lot of traction in the subsequent days that have followed the fight's unofficial announcement. It is a fight that, for the most part, is getting positive reviews, and it allows us to make certain inferences at first sight that if Christina's fighting Michaela, she's not fighting Chantel. Chantel, who was ordered to fight Christina, her mandatory challenger, up there at 140 pounds. If she's fighting Michaela at 135, she's not fighting Chantel, and that essentially means that Chantel isn't on the hook, at least not to face Christina.
So maybe the WBO will move down their ranks to find the next highest ranked available contender for Chantel to fight, or maybe they'll allow Chantel a voluntary.
Maybe they will. The second inference we can make is that this being a lightweight contest for the victor, whoever wins, whether it's Christina or Michaela, they take a step in the direction of Katie Taylor. Any fight happening at 135 pounds, Katie being that division's undisputed champion, any fight...
Every fight is a step in that direction.
Is Michaela Mayer attempting to become Katie Taylor's mandatory challenger by way of the WBO? Michaela Mayer, a top-ranked fighter, top-ranked, that has always had a way with the WBO, a good working relationship to get those fighters in position to fight for that title.
Is that what she's doing with this fight?
Christina Linardatou is not a keep busy kind of opponent, you understand, and this is not a keep busy kind of fight. She is a dangerous fighter, a dangerous puncher, an experienced former champion.
I mean, at minimum, you can say that this is not a keep busy fight.
Granted, that now is a more opportune time than most to take on Christina, because Christina's only fought once in the last 2 or 3 years. She hasn't been very active.
But she's still no pushover. Even if this is a more opportune time than most to take her on, she's still nobody's patsy.
If you're fighting somebody like this, the ends have to justify the means. And if Michaela Mayer is going to campaign as a lightweight moving forward, a fight with Christina is one of several interesting fights that she can have, depending on how long it takes her to become Katie's mandatory challenger.
The WBO could elect to crown her Katie's mandatory challenger straight away. Should she beat Christina Linardatou, they may award her that position immediately after this fight.
They might. In order to get Katie in the ring, this can't become a sides of the street kind of deal, a sides of the street kind of conversation for Michaela Mayer if she does beat Christina.
If she does beat Christina, she's got to pack her bags and head over to Matchroom, because you surely ain't the A-side fighter to know Katie Taylor.
Katie herself is supposed to be boxing Amanda Serrano for the second time later on this year, provided that Amanda makes it past Erica Cruz next month and becomes the featherweight division's undisputed champion. If she makes it through that, she's supposed to move straight into a Taylor rematch.
So put your thinking caps on, kids. Irrespective of who wins Taylor versus Serrano 2, if Michaela beats Christina, she'll be in line to face the winner, whether it's Katie or Amanda.
In previous instances, Michaela Mayer has expressed an interest in facing Amanda Serrano. That interest never materialized in fight, obviously, but the way things are going...
In the past, she's expressed an interest in facing Amanda, and she's expressed an interest in facing Katie.
What this move up to 135 pounds may herald is a bid to get the winner of that fight in the ring. And Mayer versus the winner of that fight, that's a big fight in and of itself, irrespective of a Baumgartner rematch.
But like I said, If Michaela wants to get the winner of that fight in the ring, she's likely going to have to cross over to the Matchroom side of things, especially if the winner of that fight, the winner of Taylor versus Serrano 2, ends up being Katie Taylor. If she beats Amanda for a second time...
Don't start up with the sides of the street stuff. You know what you've got to do. Alicia Baumgartner came to your side of things, more or less, to fight you. If you want Katie, you need to go to her.
And it's as simple as that.
So we are getting ahead of ourselves because who says Michaela beats Christina? Who says she beats her?
Stylistically, this doesn't look like it's going to be an easy fight. Christina Linardatou has never been stopped, and she's only ever been beat by the best of the best fighters.
Delphine Persoon gave her her first professional loss, and Katie Taylor gave her her second. Will Michaela Mayer give her her third? Once again, stylistically, Christina Linardatou is a mid-range to inside fighter, mid-range to inside hooker that stays off the line, moving side to side as they close the gap to get within proximity of their opponent.
Slipping, bobbing, and weaving under straight shots and sweeping hooks in order to come over the top with hooks of her own, looping rights of her own.
Michaela Mayer being the taller, longer, rangier fighter, Michaela Mayer whose best punches really are her straight punches, and Christina being a more compact fighter with a lower center of gravity.
She is the smaller target.
And at least to the eye, the bigger puncher of the two.
Michaela won't have to chase down Christina Linardatou because Christina, in all likelihood, is going to bring the fight to her.
But she'll do it in such a way as to not get peppered with shots on the way in, coming through the front door. And the trial for Michaela is establishing that jab she's got, which is really her best punch, establishing that jab and maintaining distance to set up other punches. It's a great fight.
But we haven't crossed the finish line yet. A date and location has yet to be announced.
So we'll keep you posted. In men's lightweight and welterweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn on Gervonta Davis versus Conor Benn. I love the fight. Why not? Gervonta has boxed at 140 pounds, and I'm sure he doesn't mind fighting up at 147 or close to it. Conor Benn's going to return either way, early 2023 or mid-2023. That's a fact.
When news first broke about Gervonta Davis's domestic dispute, Conor Benn had some choice words for Gervonta Davis, and Gervonta Davis responded. You know, there was a bit of a back and forth between them.
I didn't spend any time on it because then, like now, I don't think anything's going to come of it. I don't think we're going to see both those boys in the ring with each other as a result of a verbal exchange by way of social media. And even though Eddie Hearn is suggesting this isn't the first time he's pursued a Davis fight for one of the fighters in his Matchroom stable. Years ago, he offered Gervonta Davis upwards of $7 to $8 million to unify super featherweight titles with then IBF champion Tevin Farmer. And Gervonta...
They were willing to overpay at that time. They were willing to pay well in excess of the fight's actual market value just to be able to get Gervonta Davis on their platform, but he didn't do it.
You have to remember that at that time, Gervonta Davis had not yet debuted on pay-per-view.
DAZN was just breaking into the American market and attempting to make a splash to throw a lot of money at a lot of fights and a lot of fighters. Gervonta Davis was one among them. They were willing to pay that guy $7 to $8 million to box their IBF champion at super featherweight.
The people at the PBC talked him out of it, kept him in in-house fights the way we expect them to, even though he himself as a fighter stood to make a lot of money in a very winnable fight, I might add.
You could have given Gervonta Davis reasonable odds to beat Tevin Farmer. You could have given him reasonable odds to knock him out and become a unified super featherweight champion. But the fight didn't happen then. This fight isn't going to happen now.
This proposed fight with Conor Benn, I feel like Eddie Hearn is just throwing shit at a wall, hoping something sticks. He's suggesting it, and he's putting that idea out there with no real expectation to see it materialize, but you can't blame him for trying, because if you could do this fight, it would be worth a lot of money transatlantically. This is a fight that could galvanize fight fans on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean if you did it.
UK fans, US fans, they'd show up in the numbers. They'd show up in the metrics for a fight like this. But alas, Gervonta Davis himself as a fighter is no businessman. He's not enterprising as his then mentor, Floyd Mayweather.
He's not. The business decisions that he's made, rather, the business decisions that have been made on his behalf, are not in the best interests of getting the most bang for your buck. They seem to have been in the best interests of Al Heyman's PBC or the Showtime platform, though not necessarily Gervonta Davis's bank account, because if you think about it, he could have made a cool $7 to $8 million boxing Tevin Farmer.
It's a lot of money to box Tevin Farmer.
Especially for a fighter who at that time had not yet debuted on pay-per-view. What decisions have been made on Gervonta Davis's behalf have less to do with getting him the most money he can get and more to do with keeping content on the Showtime side of things.
That seems to be the focal point for everything.
A lot of time has passed since DAZN pursued that fight, Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, a Farmer versus Davis fight. Gervonta Davis is no longer with Mayweather Promotions, but he still is boxing on the Showtime platform. So while some things changed, other things didn't.
And beyond this weekend's upcoming fight opposite the ring, Hector Garcia, he's supposed to be fighting Ryan Garcia, a fight that feels almost too good to be true.
Because it is a good fight, and it is a big money fight. One of the few big money fights you can hope to make that doesn't involve a full-fledged title, a full-fledged alphabet title. It's one of the few fights you can stage that really ain't a bona fide title fight that would still yield a big return.
But how many more fights just like that one are out there? How many more fights like that are out there, really?
I dare say that if Gervonta Davis were more enterprising, and he beat Hector Garcia, subsequently moved on from that and beat Ryan Garcia, a Conor Benn fight somewhere in between 140 and 147 pounds, as far as money fights go, would be an even bigger fight, could be an even bigger fight than a Davis fight, than a Stevenson fight, all without an alphabet title, all without a championship belt for both boys to fight for. It's one of the few fights like that you can stage that would still bring in big cash, and it's mostly because it involves two separate demographics. The UK fight fans across the Atlantic Ocean and the US fans right here.
It's the strangest thing in boxing because there's money to be made. There really is money to be made, but it's the political boundary lines that divide the sport and the promotional outfits, the platforms. It's those political boundary lines that prevent these fighters from maximizing their earnings.
Their earning potential. Remove the political boundary lines. You do a fight like Davis versus Conor Benn, that's a pay-per-view on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. That's a pay-per-view that the consumers would purchase in both the United Kingdom and the United States, amplifying what both fighters stand to make from the show. And if Gervonta Davis isn't with Mayweather Promotions anymore, then what's stopping him?
Al Heyman?
In theory, nothing should be, because Al Heyman is but an advisor. At least that's what they say. But what advisor brokers deals with networks independently and has this much control over a fighter's autonomy? Clearly, he's more than just an advisor, because the best advice you can give Gervonta Davis is to expand his horizons, not limit himself to what PBC has to offer him.
What do they have to offer him?
What?
A Rolly Romero rematch? An Isaac Cruz rematch?
The Frank Martin kid that nobody knows?
Oh, he's a good fighter. I'm not saying he's not a good fighter. He's a good fighter, but nobody knows him. Only hardcore boxing fans are aware of his existence.
So what does the PBC have to offer Gervonta Davis? What? A Rolly Romero rematch? An Isaac Cruz rematch? What? A Frank Martin fight? An Alberto Puello fight? None of those guys and none of those fights pay you what fighting Conor Benn would pay you.
You say that he's fighting Ryan Garcia.
Okay, let's say he does and he beats him. What then?
What fight on the PBC side of things beyond that Ryan Garcia fight is equal in value to a potential Conor Benn fight?
What fight? You'd have to be obtuse to not see that a Conor Benn fight would be a huge fight if Gervonta Davis were receptive to it. And finally, old Fish Eyes Frank Warren had this to say on his old buddy Eddie Hearn, Matchroom. All I keep seeing is fighters are leaving them.
It's not a secret that in the past calendar year, some fighters that used to fight on Matchroom shows ended up crossing over to Boxer and Sky. None of them ended up crossing over to Frank Warren in Queensbury.
Though all the same, they did lose a couple of their fighters the last calendar year. All I keep seeing is fighters are leaving them. Matchroom, at the moment, Warren Tolt seconds out. That's it. And there's a reason for that. They're not getting that exposure. You go on Dead Zone, you don't get seen. Warren cracked.
Echoing Bob Arum's sentiments about the platform.
I appreciate the rivalry between the promotional outfits because it forces every single one of them to stay on their toes and keep up with the Joneses. Though Frank Warren's statements, they're not exactly accurate and they're not exclusive to DAZN, where some fighters the last calendar year ended up leaving Matchroom. Fighters like Lawrence Okolie and Savannah Marshall and April April Hunter, Chris Billum Smith, and Liam Smith.
Chris Eubank Jr.
It's not like any of those fighters migrated from Matchroom over to Queensberry. They migrated to Frank's other competitor, Sky Sports and Boxer.
So what are you so happy about?
That still creates more competition for Frank Warren and BT Sport, whether they're on Boxer or they're on Matchroom.
They're not on Queensberry.
And it's not like Queensberry Promotions fighters haven't migrated over to the Matchroom side of things. They have. Josh Warrington left old Fish Eyes Frank Warren for Matchroom, and so did Billy Joe Saunders. You tell me what fight got more eyes on it.
Billy Joe Saunders versus Shafat Isufi or Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo Alvarez in front of 76,000.
Over 76,000 people showed up to see that fight. They broke the indoor attendance record here in America. So while it's cute,
Whimsical to call his own dead zone and suggest that no one is watching the app, I'd wager that more people saw Saunders versus Alvarez than Saunders versus Isufi on your platform.
had Billy Joe Saunders stayed with Frank Warren, could Frank have gotten him a fight of equal value, equal size and scale to the fight that he got being on the Matchroom side of things? Did Frank have anything like that lined up for Billy Joe Saunders? The answer is no. That's why he changed his decorum. That's why he left.
But Frank don't want to talk about that.
Do you know how many young guys come on the scene and how many of them disappear over the years, Warren said? This business is about longevity. It's about dealing with the bad times as well as dealing with the good times, because there are bad times.
I know, I don't imagine you're having a very good time having to compete with both Sky Sports and DAZN as a platform. He's got Tyson Fury.
Frank Warren does. And Tyson can draw to some extent. He can. The upcoming fight between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, that undisputed heavyweight title fight, is a major event. It's a major fight, but how many others like that?
Let's not pretend that Queensberry Promotions stable is on par with Matchroom's. It isn't.
Men's boxing, women's boxing, heavyweight boxing, like heavyweight boxing.
Let's not pretend that Queensberry Promotions' stable is on par with Matchroom's. It isn't. All Queensberry really has is Tyson Fury.
And while it is true that Matchroom lost some of its fighters to Sky Sports and Boxer, that just creates more competition for you, even though that's not the story you're telling. You're still focused on Eddie, when Ben Shalom is just as much your competitor as he is.
Sky Sports and Boxer are just as much your competitor as Matchroom and DAZN. That just creates more problems and more work for you, because now you have to compete with the both of them.
Canelo Alvarez is one of the biggest names in boxing, if not the biggest name in boxing overall. And by way of DAZN's press release, they indicated themselves that they got well over 1 million buys with his Golovkin trilogy last year. Where you're playing around,
Where you're ballparking figures and being deliberately vague about what Fury versus Chisora did.
DAZN released the figure outright, and they weren't vague about it. Approximately 1.1 million pay-per-view buys overall, 800,000 of those buys coming from right here in the US of A at a price point that well exceeds the price point of a UK pay-per-view. Here in America, a pay-per-view is $80. Over there in the UK, it's roughly $32 American.
You're out of your league, Frank.
Hall of Fame promoter that he might be, he really does have it all riding on Tyson Fury and Tyson Fury alone. Matchroom's stable is far more robust than Frank's.
Lee Wood and Josh Warrington.
Chocolatito Gonzalez, Juan Francisco Estrada.
Unbeaten up-and-comers like Galal Yafai. Unbeaten up-and-comers like Dalton Smith. Are we really going to do this?
Unbeaten up-and-comers like Diego Pacheco, Rishat Mati.
And yeah, a couple of fighters did leave Matchroom, but so what?
So?
A couple of fighters left Queensberry. It's no big deal.